Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be reviewing Under the Banner of Heaven by John Krakauer. I hope I pronounced that right. Um, the book is about 400 pages, um, and this is my very first time reading this book for this class. I found it really interesting. I've never seen the movie or anything. I don't think there is a movie, but yeah. So I don't have a hard copy, but I have it. I read it on my phone right here. You can see, oops. Yes, this is the book. I downloaded it through Anna's Archive. It's a website where you can download books for free. I definitely very much recommend it. I think one of the main reasons why people sort of stray from books is that it costs money or it's not like super accessible, but I had it right in my phone. You can just download it, and I think it's really great. Just a little sidebar. Okay, so Under the Banner of Heaven is a nonfiction investigative book that sort of explores this double homicide murder that happened in Utah in 1984, which was committed by two brothers, Ron and Dan Lafferty. And those brothers claimed that they were following a direct command from God. So the author kind of uses this case as a lens to sort of investigate Mormon fundamentalism, religious extremism, and the ways that these extreme beliefs can lead to violence. So, Mormon fundamentalism is kind of this small group that broke away from the mainstream Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So they, unlike sort of LDS main church, which abandoned polygamy in the late 1800s. These fundamentalist groups still practice polygamy and they interpret early Mormon teachings very literally. So they often, these groups live in very isolated communities, they follow very strict religious rules, very extreme forms of belief, and they can sometimes lead to these traumatic murders like the Lafferty case, which is specifically focused on in the book. So right at the beginning of the book, um, the author really does a great job of like setting up the context for the story, explaining the history of Mormon fundamentalism for those who aren't familiar. Gives a lot of background on the people involved and kind of like hooks the reader in immediately, and then also gives background. And so I think that that was a really important lesson of like explaining the topic to your audience, so that it's accessible for everyone, not just people who are interested in this specific field. I know a lot of people are, very interested in true crime, so this book would be very interesting to them if there's someone who already knows about like, cults and religious extremism, but some people who may not wouldn't know it, and so if you just sort of jumped right into it without giving that background, that would not be good for readers and that would potentially turn them away. And so I think that that was a really important, lesson of sort of laying a foundation for people so that they can enjoy it. People from all different interests, not just specifically people who are interested in true crime, but also making it, engaging and interesting. So that was a really big takeaway. Sort of by the middle of the book, the author sort of investigates, the crime itself and the lives of the people involved. And this section of it really sort of taught me about I thought it didn't teach me exactly, but I think it was very, highlighted an important part of journalism, which is, connecting to sources, sort of building that trust and then verifying facts. Throughout the book, he cross-checks, double-checks testimonies from documents, from family members, court records, law enforcement, people in the broader, Mormon fundamentalist community, I'm sorry, and to sort of build a clear narrative with multiple perspectives, not just one, which I think sort of eliminates bias that may come into it, because as much as journalists try to remain completely unbiased, it's impossible to have that, but I think by interviewing all different types of sources and different types of people, you get all those perspectives, and so that sort of eliminates, as much bias as you can. And I think this is a really, big lesson for all journalists, but specifically student journalists. No matter what the beat is, what you're covering, verifying details, piecing stories, information, for stories is really important, and not just relying on, like, people around you who are easy sources, but, people who are important to the story, and getting a wide variety of perspectives for all of it. Kind of by the end of the book, the author is wrapping up this very complex story, but he's still sort of leaving readers with questions to think about, and, leaving people with a lasting impression that they can continue to sort of resonate with, and question. And I think that that really kind of showed me how even a story that's so heavy on, like, true crime, and heavy reporting can still have a storytelling narrative and still be interesting. You know, he uses the Lafferty's family personal stories, and their upbringing, their religious convictions, and stuff like that. So it gives people and readers insight into, why their actions and their motivations, rather than simply labeling them as, like, you know, cult members who acted crazy because of that. You know what I mean? I think he does a really great job of humanizing them and making the reader sort of connect with these people, especially if you're, not really familiar with like religion and extremism and that and stuff. So I think that that's a really great part, that he humanizes people and sort of connects you to these characters who are, because they're real people, they're not just fictional. These are real people, and these are real stories. And so I think that, showing their faith and their humanity rather than just reducing them to stereotypes is really important. And I think that that is why other student journalists should read it, because, it's very good at sort of bridging the gap between both of those things, and having a very fact-based story with a lot of, reporting, a lot of, like, hard evidence, and then also, that human aspect, humanizing people, and sort of, exposing people to stories that they are not familiar with in their day-to-day lives. And I think that that is really what's so great about this book. He gives insight behind their motivations, and yeah. For my rating, I would say this is about an 8 or 9 oranges. I think it's really a great story. I think it's very captivating, and I would definitely recommend giving it a try.